So welcome, Jill, to Secrets in Nature. We are so excited to have you here.
I know. I can't wait to learn all about Vedic astrology.
Dive
Yeah,
in.
yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that you're talking so much about. I love the tagline, "How we affect nature and how nature affects us," is like
Yes.
your
Oh,
thing,
thank
and
you.
astrology
Yeah.
is so much a part of nature. So it's just a pleasure to be talking with you about it and how
Yes.
that aspect of nature can affect us. So yeah.
I
Mhm.
know, because when people think nature, they think of like Earth, which is absolutely nature, but it's everything around us. It's outer space, it's the planets, it's everything. So I'm so excited to
Yeah.
talk about it.
Oh, good, wonderful.
So just to kick things off, do you mind sharing your background, how you got into astrology, and how you became inspired to help others through birth chart readings?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. I haven't thought about this in a while. I had a circuitous route to life purpose, I think. I had a phase where I was an engineering student in college, and then I went to medical school,
Oh, wow.
and then I became a yoga teacher. And one of the things that always helped me going forward is that I wanted to help people when they're going through tough times. I think that's the through line for everything. And so when I found medicine, I was like, oh, I can help people this way. I left engineering to because I wanted to be around people and not around minerals and machines. And then I went to medical school because I thought, well, what better way to help people than with their health and well-being? And I thought that I could help people just with their struggles and help them with motivational advice in addition to medical intervention. But I realized that it was hard to do that when you had to meet so many patients throughout the day. So so I took a pause at medical school, and it became I fell in love with yoga and realized this really helped me in my life so much. And I wanted to spread it around and help people with it. It was such a powerful tool to help people because it helps you on mind, body, and heart and soul. And it was the best thing that helped me at the time. So I wanted to teach that. And so I still teach it to this day. And then in one of my yoga teacher trainings, I had a student whose brother was a Vedic astrologer. And I'd always been fascinated by astrology. When I was in college, I did all my friends' birth charts and stuff just for fun. But I found that the astrology at the time didn't help me with predictions. So I kind of like set it aside. I just used it as a tool to understand myself. And then when student introduced me to a brother who's Sam Geppy, who's my teacher, who does a lot of stuff on YouTube, I started to watch his videos just to kind of see, like, check this thing out, because it was a part of yoga. Vedic astrology is sort of the astrology that comes from India, and it's based on yogic principles. So I started watching his videos. I was like, this explains exactly how I'm feeling right now. And like, I totally feel this way right now. This helps me so much. And the more I studied it, the more it resonated and seemed so perfect to fit exactly what I was going through. And it also gave me like wisdom and tools and yoga and practices and things I could do to help myself while I was going through those things. So I started studying with him, and I did his certification course. And then I started doing readings for people. And because I knew how much it affected my life to understand my chart and to track the planets and use that on a daily basis to guide me. But I had no idea how big of an impact it would have on other people. And so I started doing readings, and I kind of developed my own method of doing readings in a way. And I realized that I could help people fundamentally with like the hardest things they were struggling with. When I was helping people with their individual problems make sense of what they were going through, it really helped maybe realize just how impactful it was. You know, like, I could console someone who's going through a hard time, who is struggling with divorce or death of a loved one. I could also tell people why they were feeling anxious, and when it would end. I could tell people like what they were learning and what to focus on when they were lost and didn't know their purpose or what they should be doing with their work. And that it just made me feel so good to have something that I could help people with when nothing else can really help sometimes. So so I'm glad that, and so I've been doing it now, wow, for like 6 years. I've been doing readings for 6 years, I think. And I've been tracking the planets for like 8.
That's
And
awesome.
it's been just the best. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think astrology is crazy. Like once you get into it and you're like, wow, this is like really eye-opening.
It really is. It
Mhm.
definitely is.
So, how would you describe astrology to someone that doesn't know a thing about it?
It's a great question. Astrology is just basically understanding the movement of the planets and how they affect us,
Got it.
and different ways of tracking it, and interpreting that. And it really works on, no matter what astrology you're doing, it really works on a few fundamental principles, which is basically that there are, in the sky, if you were to draw a circle around the earth and chop it up into 12 sections, and there's just like 12 sections of the sky surrounding the earth, and each section has a different vibe or different qualities. And then the planets move from the perspective of the earth, move around the earth through these sections of the sky. And the planets and when they move into those sections of the sky, they take on those qualities. The planets represent different aspects of ourself, but they're more like our psychology than they are anything else. Like the moon represents many things, but it represents our emotions. The Mercury represents our thinking. Mars is our ability to take action and do things that we don't want to do. And so those are aspects of ourself, and those qualities affect how well that planet is able to do its job and basically affect how we feel. And that's why the planets make us affect how we feel and how capable we are of using these sides of ourselves. And then when the planets go through the sections of the sky, based on your birth time, which is individual to each person, each section of the sky represents a different area of life as well. And these are the houses. And so when a planet goes into into a sign, it's also going into an area of your life and affecting an area of your life. And so that when the planet is in that area of life, you feel like working on that thing. That area of life becomes something that you really want to improve upon. It also leads to opportunities in that area of life, and also ways that you can grow in that area of life and learn how to handle it a little bit better. And so this sets up these natural rhythms, and where it changes how we feel. It changes a lot of our mood, but also what we want. And that's the main thing that changes when anything changes in astrology, is it changes our desires, just what we want, what we feel like doing, and what we're motivated to do. When you start to align with that, it's easier to do things when you're in the mood to do them.
Mhm.
It's just when you want to do them, because it not only when you do things when you're in the mood to do them, it's more enjoyable for you. You have more energy to go after that thing. And you're also recognize that you're doing the right thing at the right time, because if you miss the window where you're motivated to work on that thing, you have to wait like sometimes a year or 10 or 30 years to get that same opportunity again. So it's powerful in that way. It also sets up natural rhythms of time as well, because the planets take time to go through each sign.
Mm-hmm.
So each sign, so some planets take a year to 3 years to move through a sign. And then those affect what you'll want all year, and those affect like your goals for the year and your yearly themes. Some planets change every few weeks to a month, and that affects you on a monthly basis, what you'll want all month. And that can help you plan out, your new moon intentions, or your goals for that month. And then the moon changes signs every 2.5 days, which changes how you feel and what you want every few days, which can affect how you plan your week. And then the ascendant changes every 2.5 hours, which affects what you feel hourly, what you feel like doing hourly. And so that sets up these natural rhythms of, there's yearly cycles, there's monthly cycles, and then within that, there's these 10-day cycles where it takes the moon to go through 4 phases, around 10 days. So it's a little longer than a week. And then there are like about 4 to 6 hour periods where we're going through different phases. And this just sets up our natural rhythms. It's not only the natural rhythms of how we feel, but also the rhythms of growth, because it's kind of like you go through beginning, middle, and end in a year to 3 years, a beginning, middle, and end, and then a rest period. So you go over that in a year, and you do that every month, and you do that every 10 days or so, which is, and you do that every like 4 to 6 hours or so. And so when you know where you are in that rhythm, you can align with that and make better choices. And it's just easier to do things, and easier to recognize the growth that you should be focusing on as well, like what lessons you should be learning, so you can be on the lookout for opportunities for that thing. What this feels like on an everyday basis is, for me, is that like, when I am in the middle of my day and I'm like, I don't know what to do. What should I do right now? I'll actually look at the astrology chart. I'll look at my daily rhythms tracker that I make for myself and for others, and be like, well, what house is activated now? You know, what area of my life is what I'm craving? Oh, it's the 4th house. I should do some cleaning. I feel like doing cleaning more in the 4th house than any other time. It actually is incredibly enjoyable. So I'm like, oh, let me clean. And then usually I clean for a little bit, and then that gets me going. Or, oh, this is a great time to spend with my husband. And if I miss that window, then I miss the opportunity to want that and do that really well. So, and also on a weekly basis, I just be like, well, where am I in the cycle? Am I at the beginning of a cycle, the middle, or the end? Or am I a rest period? And that will help me focus on my tasks. Should I start something new, or should I just focus on finishing what I'm already doing? Or should I just rest and reflect on what I should be doing? And that helps me figure out what I should be doing on a weekly basis. And then every month we have an opportunity to dramatically improve one area of our life. And we have to wait another year until we get that opportunity again. So when I set my new intentions on the new moon, because the cycle starts at the new moon, doesn't start at the beginning of the month, then I feel intuitively like what I need to do. And the astrology helps me double check that with what I know I'll be wanting that month. And so that helps me plan out my intentions and focus on the right things. And then every year, like for example, right now, I'm in a rest year. I am not a resty type person. I'm very hardworking, and I tend to take on too much because I get excited about things. But this year I'm supposed to rest and
the whole year
and heal. Yeah. It happens once every 4 years, basically.
For you though, this is like specific to you. And your
exactly,
birth chart.
For me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, based on my birth time. So it's a rest year for me, and I have to be patient through that and let things percolate. And the more I embrace that, the happier I am. And I realize that this is actually a really powerful period where I can heal a lot of pain, release a lot of negativity, but also do research and prepare for the next outgoing phase that I'm about to enter next year. So it's nice to know. Yeah, it's nice to know where you are in the story and what plot point you should work on.
So you're truly living by the planets and where they are in the sky at any given moment, and you're living by the moon phases.
Totally.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That was a great explanation.
It was.
Oh, thank you.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It's so complicated.
It's
like more than like a horoscope in a magazine.
Yeah, a lot of people skip like the explanation, I feel like, when I listen to interviews and stuff or podcasts. But that was really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's what you said is true. It's so complicated. Astrology is so complicated. Ridiculously complicated. One of my teachers said it's like doing calculus on calculus. That's how hard it is.
Yeah.
And it's why it's really hard to replace an astrologer who studied a lot of this stuff, because they can see so many things that you can't when you're just starting to learn out. It took me really about 4 years to feel really confident tracking the planets and understanding them myself. So
because I guess you have to know like what each planet represents, and then what each space in the sky represents. So like there's like subdivisions and subdivisions. Like that's so interesting, so complicated,
and how they combine too.
Yeah,
in like crazy ways.
Yeah.
And my job, I think, And what I'm trying to do is try to make it simple for people. It's what I do in my
Yeah.
readings, but it's also what I want to do in my courses that I'm developing right now, is to make it easy for people to track this, to learn probably about 80% of what the complete picture is, so that you can really know the few things you need to know to have the greatest impact. And I think it's really one of my special talents is to make complicated things simple. It's what I did with yoga. And now it's my mission is Vedic astrology. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So can you give us a brief history of Vedic astrology? I know it's probably extensive, but just a super brief, like where it originated, things like that.
I actually just, preparing for this, I just looked it up. The first, it comes from ancient India. And I mean like ancient India. And ancient India was a really amazing time where they had so many technological advances at the time. Like they had sewer systems in like 2000 BC before there were anywhere in Europe or the Middle East or anything like that. So they had a very sophisticated technology, and a lot of the wisdom and traditions that started around that time, which includes Ayurveda and Vedic astrology, were very sophisticated. And so the first mentions of Vedic astrology are in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest book known to man, which is written around, which was orally passed down, but then started around like 2,000 to 3,000 BC. So this is how ancient it is. And I think, and so in India, they've been using it for that long to live their lives. It's kind of just part of the culture.
They were living by the planets.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
cool.
They used it to time like rituals and stuff to create auspicious circumstances, but people also use it for in marriage compatibility, arranged marriages, and business planning, when to open their business. So
Wow.
yeah.
I want to ask this up front because I know for me, I'm much more familiar with Western astrology, as I'm sure a lot of our listeners might be. And I remember when you gave me a birth chart reading, which was 4 years ago, I didn't know anything about astrology. I didn't even know that you were giving me a Vedic astrology reading because I didn't know anything about astrology. And for a long time, I thought like my signs from the birth chart reading, I was like so confused because then I was on CoStar, like making my Western astrology birth chart. And I was like, CoStar is broken. Like, this isn't right. Like, that's not what Jill told me. And turns out it's two completely different types of astrology. So for anyone that might be listening that's much more familiar with Western astrology, do you think you could maybe just give us some of the main differences between the two?
Yes. I will start by saying that they're both right, which is weird to think about. The main difference is the way they calculate the sections of the sky. So remember, each of the signs is a section of the sky. What Western astrology goes more by the tropical zodiac, which is based on the spring equinox. So wherever the Earth is facing at the spring equinox, that section of the sky becomes Aries. So it's kind of like projecting from the Earth up into the sky and saying that that section of the sky is Aries, which of course the planets affect us that way too. The Vedic astrology, however, goes by the sidereal zodiac. Sidereal refers to stars. So it's based on the stars down. And so the section of the sky that is Aries is like always been Aries. That's where the stars are. The other thing too is that Vedic astrology, and they figured this out thousands of years BC, by the way, before they actually figured it out in Europe, is that what happens with the Earth is there's this thing called the precession of equinoxes, which means that like when the Earth spins, every 72 years or so, it changes the angle of the degree with respect to, the sky. It's kind of like a spinning top. A top spins, when it spins really fast, it stays upright. But when it starts to slow down, it kind of like gets the top gets wider and it starts to tilt. And so Vedic astrology accounts for that tilt, whereas Western astrology doesn't. It's just like, all right, here's where you are. This is the section of the sky. And so that's called the precession of equinoxes. So it shows that the equinoxes sort of change a little bit. And so after thousands and thousands of years, I think there was a point like in 100 BC where they were the same, but over thousands of years, they got slightly different. So the way the sections of the sky are is, it's usually Western astrology is a sign ahead of things, So with Vedic astrology, it says, like, for example, Aries is the first sign and Taurus is the second sign. So when Western astrology says the sun is in Taurus, in Vedic astrology, it usually says the sun is in Aries. So it's like the sign before. So it's off by, the sections of the sky are off by a sign.
Wait, well, that makes sense. Sorry, continue.
Oh, no. It's yeah. So, but the thing about it is that whether you're thinking about how we're projecting our feelings up to the sky and how the sky is projecting our feelings down to us, they both work.
Yeah.
And so, and each system developed techniques that really resonated with how you see that section of the sky. And it was funny, one time I was hanging out with a Western astrologer on my meditation retreat, and we did each other's charts and we came to the same conclusions, but she was looking at angles and conjunctions and stuff, and I was looking at the houses more, and it worked. But I will say though, the reason I do Vedic astrology is that when I feel something change in me, like when what I want changes and how my mood changes, it always matches the Vedic astrology way of looking at the sky and the houses. So that's why I go by that. And the more I study Vedic astrology, the more it resonates with me. But I also study Western astrology, and I use techniques from Western astrology to understand things, because they did some very sophisticated things too. There's also some features in Vedic astrology, like the dashas, the timing systems, the seasons of your life, that isn't in Western astrology. That's really cool. And also the other main difference is, and also Vedic astrology is designed to work on yoga principles, which is kind of a cool thing. Things that are part of the philosophy are within Vedic astrology, which is why it also resonated with me a lot, because as a yoga teacher. And the last thing is that the Western astrology, and by Western astrology, there's a whole bunch of different astrologies in Western astrology, and they all calculate the sky differently, and they all have different techniques. It's like there's a lot within Western astrology too, just like there is in Vedic astrology, a lot of variety. So I think it's more important to find a teacher or a way of looking at the sky that feels right to you. And the only way you can figure that out is by tracking it. The last difference is that Vedic astrology emphasizes the ascendant or the rising sign, which is based on the birth time, which is why it's hard. I think that's why, like, someone asked me, why isn't Vedic astrology more mainstream? And I'm like, well, they do so much with the birth time and the moon that, like, it's hard for people to easily know, oh, this is my sign. Whereas because it's the Western astrology is based on the tropical zodiac, the same dates usually are the same sign for everybody every year, because it lines up with that calendar, whereas Vedic astrology lines up with the lunar calendar. And so it's easier to make predictions based on the month you were born. So the Western astrology focuses a lot more on the sun sign, and Vedic astrology focus more on the rising sign and the houses, I think.
So many people don't even know what time they were born, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things I do is if some astrologers can help you figure out your birth time, I'm sort of good at it. If you can get it within 6 hours, I can do it. But some people specialize in that, rectify the birth time. So even if you don't know your birth time, sometimes you can figure it out. Yeah.
I have to say, so I just realized this while you were talking, because you said for Vedic astrology, if a planet in Western astrology is in one sign, it's the sign before that for Vedic. And I'm just now realizing, because Rachel and I realized last night, like, okay, we're Cancer suns in our birthdays are 2 days apart, Rachel and I. And we realized last night we're both Cancer suns in Western astrology, and we're Gemini suns in Vedic astrology. So one sign earlier. And then I just realized my whole birth chart is just in Vedic astrology, one sign earlier. So I'm Cancer sun in Western, Gemini sun in Vedic. I'm a Virgo moon in Western. So one sign earlier, Leo moon in Vedic. So I just realized like, oh, it all just shifts up one. I just
Yeah.
realized that.
Yeah.
So that's all. I
Yeah.
just came
It's
to that
crazy.
conclusion.
I couldn't believe
And they're
it
all
when
in this.
oh,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead, Rachel.
I was just gonna say, like, I couldn't believe it when I said I was a Gemini sun, because like my mom's a Gemini in Western astrology and we butt heads so bad. I was like, how am I a Gemini? It is crazy.
But she is probably a Taurus,
Yeah.
who's probably more stubborn. So,
Mhm.
So
and then
interesting.
yeah. It isn't always, because my moon sign is the same in both. But it generally is. It's like a
Gotcha.
20-degree difference.
Gotcha.
And the way I see it is I also, by the way, my entire family was born in the month of June, and I was a Pisces, and I was like the black sheep, and I was like, I just hate Geminis, and then I end up being a Gemini. It's like the cosmic karma.
That's funny.
My ascendant's Gemini.
So
So
funny.
yeah, but I think what helps me understand them both is I think that my Western astrology signs is who I'm becoming, because it's the next sign. But who I am now in like my psychology and what I'm struggling with is like my Vedic astrology sign. So my Vedic astrology chart. So I feel like as I get older, I'm growing more into my Western chart. And becoming less of a Gemini and more of a Cancer. And that's been ascendant, and that's been really interesting as I started to like open my heart and feel more versus being a little bit more intellectual and objective and impartial when I was younger. So I feel like the Western astrology gives you advice on where you're headed and helps you understand what's coming next, and then Vedic astrology helps you in the moment.
Gotcha.
And
So that's
that
a big
helps me.
difference.
Yeah, it helps me hold both too. So
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, because it is confusing when you start like reading both and you're like, well, which one is it? But if
Yeah.
you look at it that way, it makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and the certain things are the same, because sort of the way the planets are in relationship to each other are the same, no matter how you section off the houses, and no matter how you start the ascendant. But also the way they calculate houses in Western astrology, most commonly, which is using Placidius, actually makes the houses different lengths. And it weirdly, coincidentally, ends up matching more with the Vedic astrology houses, which are just everything is like it's their whole sign astrology. Whereas like if the ascendant is there, then the whole that whole house that sign is the first house. Whereas Placidius kind of calculates in a different way, Western wise. So anyway, I'm just nerding out now.
So do the signs have the same characteristics within each type of astrology? Like does like a Gemini have the same characteristics whether you're looking at Vedic astrology or Western astrology?
Yes, they're very much the same, with maybe different astrologers and different lineages and different styles of astrology emphasize certain qualities more than others. I think the most fascinating thing about understanding what a sign represents is why it does those qualities. Why does that sign have those qualities? And it's actually determined by the ascendant and the configuration of houses and what planets rule those houses, which my teacher Sam Geppy wrote a book on it called The Ascendant. And it explains why a Gemini is the way they are and why a Taurus is the way they are based on just how nature is, like the sections of the sky. And so like it helps. I think the strongest descriptions of signs are the ones that are holistic. That's like, why is a Gemini like that versus just listing qualities, and like what drives them and what causes that. Oh, for example, Geminis are very creative. They have a hidden creative side. And because Venus rules the 5th house and 12th house. So when you're a Gemini and you figure out the houses, Venus rules the signs of Taurus and Libra, which are the 5th and 12th house. And so Geminis are capable of creating very transcendent art, but it usually doesn't lead to income because it's the 12th house is about loss and freedom, but it leads to exhilarating experiences with art.
So complicated.
So you wouldn't think that like a social, talky Gemini who's all about ideas would have this like artistic side, but it does. And the reason why Leos tend to exaggerate their words is because their second house is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is about talking, and the second house is about talking. So it's like talking on talking, you know. And so it's cool that like, oh, that's why it is the way it is. And it also helps you understand hidden things about the signs that you would not recognize. Like Aries people are very about taking action, and they're enthusiastic and they're exciting to be around, but they have this kind of hermit side that they need to go to sometimes. Same with Leos, as Leos need time. Leos are the great leaders and the charismatic people who inspire people and empower people, but they need time alone. And you see that when you look at it based on the ascendant and the way the houses, what planets rule each house. So it's fascinating.
I will say I'm a Gemini rising in Western astrology, but I'm a Taurus rising, which I know based on our birth chart reading in Western or in Vedic astrology. And I do think that resonates with me so much more. Like everything you had to say about a Taurus rising resonated with me so much. So I do want to start looking more into Vedic astrology than I have been in Western astrology.
Good. Awesome. Yeah.
Would you say it's more accurate?
For me, I wouldn't say accurate because I think there's wisdom in all of them. I think that Vedic astrology is better at explaining my moods, and I'm able to plan better by it. And I think it really just matters is if you have a good astrologer who's able to explain it well, because it doesn't even matter with the technique. If the astrologer misunderstands something or focuses too much on one technique versus the other, you know, they're going to, and also every astrologer is a sign, so they're going to have their biases. So
interesting.
I think it's more important to find an astrologer who is really testing out everything and is continuing to learn and experiment and is really trying to understand it in depth. And I found that in my teacher, Sam, who happens to be a fellow Gemini ascendant. So it helps to have the astrologer be the same ascendant because they have inside info on what it's like to be a Gemini. But so I think for me, I think it's more important to get your information from a trusted source. But all I know is that the more I study Vedic astrology, the more it resonates. And the more it helps me, and it's so right on, it's eerie. And it's even eerie when I do readings for other people, because people are like, oh my God, it's like you're in your head. Even my family members don't even know that, my close family members. So because it works for me so strongly, that's what I teach. And that's the kind of thing that I learned. So it's more accurate, I guess, for me. But I think everyone needs to go through their own investigation process to understand what's out there, to really appreciate it when you find the right thing that resonates.
Speaking of Danielle, she shared with us when we interviewed her yesterday that you were able to get a sense of her past lives because you got to know her so well through her birth chart readings. So please share with us how that comes through for you, if you can.
Well, I'm not an intuitive, like I don't channel anything. I have a natural intuition that helps me interpret things, but it's actually in the chart. It comes in the chart. So past lives and what happens to us in childhood is related to K2 in the chart. K2 is the South Node, also known as the South Node in Western astrology. And what's cool about the nodes is that there's a North Node and a South Node. And called Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology, but it's the same thing as the North Node and South Node. And it sets up your soul's purpose. It's the thing that your soul wants to experience in this lifetime that it's not good at yet. And so the way we learn and grow is by having experiences and making mistakes. And over time, as you grow up until like 45, you're pursuing that area of life. It's the thing you're unhealthily obsessed with, or healthily obsessed with, because it's what your soul wants to do. So Ketu is the Rahu end points towards the thing that your soul wants to go after. The Ketu end is the opposite of that. In order to pursue that area of life to the extreme, you have to care a little bit less about the opposites, house and sign. You know, for example, my Rahu's in my 3rd house, which is about self-expression and figuring out your own ideas about things, also pursuing your interests and hobbies, just because you like them, not because they help anyone else. So it's like learning to be selfish in a way. And the 9th house is the opposite. It's about finding a teacher to tell you what to do and finding a bigger thing to believe in, and then serving those bigger causes, like your purpose, but also bigger institutions, your religion, your belief system. And so in order for me to pursue this path of, I need to figure it out on my own and explore and figure out what works for me and experiment, I need to sort of like be around teachers, but also be critical of them and know that like, that's not what I'm supposed to do, is just believe a teacher blindly. I have to go and figure out my own ways of doing things and experiment, which is what the way I learned astrology is. I'm lucky. I have a lot of planets in my 9th house. So I find really great teachers in my life. I have other planets besides Ketu. But I'm here to kind of pursue that, to pursue my own ideas. So I find great teachers, but then I question them and I do my own thing. And that helps me create my own system and become my own teacher in my own right. So it's a beautiful path. But the Ketu, and in order for me to start to pursue that, Ketu represents your past lives, and you catch up on your past lives based on what happens to us in childhood. So the way Ketu works is, Ketu represents the thing that we're a genius at, that we have a lot of planetary experience with from past lives, and from childhood. It's what we're good at, but it usually came from learning pain, and it's what we're good at that we're mastering. And so the last few lessons are always hard and painful. And so that area of life, because we're so good at it, we're a little bit dissatisfied with that area of life. And so it makes us not want that thing. And because you want this side less and this side more, the Rahu end more and the Ketu side less, it makes you do the Rahu end and kind of ignore the Ketu end a little bit. This is set up by what happens to us in childhood, and it reflects your past lives because it's what you did a lot. So it's been there, done that. You already did it a lot, so you don't need to do it more. And you're already like, so it's kind of like, I already know how to do this. Why should I do this more? So there's a lot of experience and genius and skill, but no desire. And it's because we did it a lot in past lives. And the way we catch up on our past lives is what happens to us in childhood. And it's why childhood is often can be wonderful, but often has some pain in it in order to get, but that pain sets us up to pursue that Rahu end. You know, it reminds us of what we don't want, and then it makes us pursue the opposite. For me, another really interesting parallel, specifically talking about past lives, is because I've been lucky enough to have insights about my past lives for myself, from other people, and from myself, my own intuition. And what I did a lot in past lives was serve other people to the point where I sacrificed myself. And my Ketu is in Aquarius, which is all about selfless service. What I'm good at is putting aside my own needs and serving and doing whatever anybody else needs. What I'm not good at is putting myself first and making myself happy. And you see how if you sacrificed yourself a lot in past lives and served someone else, I don't need to do that more. I need to learn this other skill, which is to make myself happy. And what happened to me in childhood, I had a wonderful childhood. I was in Venus Dasha, so I was very happy. But what happened is my parents were very selfless and served other people. In fact, my entire family is much more selfless than me. And I saw how that can go wrong. Like my dad would be so busy helping other people, he would ignore my mom, you know, and I saw that it's good to be selfless and to serve, but it's also important to do what you enjoy too. And it made me see the problems with it. And then therefore it made me pursue the opposite end. That's an easier lesson than most, I think, with their K2. So K2 can give you an understanding of what experiences you may have had in past lives and in childhood. And so looking at that and can really help you make sense of those things in beautiful ways.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So if someone were to get a birth chart reading, wherever their K2 falls on the birth chart, then those characteristics of that area would represent maybe the things they were doing in their past lives, what they're good at.
Yeah, that area of life is the thing they'll be good at, but they won't like. And they will reject. And it will also be, and the reason they reject it is because they're so good at it. Like one of the things, I am annoyed by very few things, but the thing that annoys me the most is when teachers don't give you all the information and explain it really well, because I'm a good teacher. I have K2 in my ninth house. Ninth house is teaching. So like, I'm a really good teacher. And it frustrates me when when teachers talk about 5 things, but there's really 10 things that you really need to know, or they put it in a haphazard order where it's hard to learn. And so it means that, but like now understanding that, it means I can recognize that. I know that it's for a purpose and that I get less annoyed with teachers. But also it makes me really use that skill, even though I'm really hard on myself when I use that skill, because Katie is also self-criticism. So yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That really answered the question.
Cool. I actually would love to know, like, I kind of know the differences, but I don't think a lot of people do, between like your sun sign and the ascendant and then your moon sign. I know those are like the major 3.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a really deep response and then there's a really like simple response. It's cool to think about it in terms of yoga, yoga philosophy. The ascendant is, so the sun is in Vedic astrology more represents your soul. It is closely tied to your career and your vision for your life and your sense of clarity and confidence. But it really represents your soul and the qualities of your soul. And the way the moon is the moon takes those qualities of the soul and reflects the light, like how the moon reflects the light of the sun. And so the sun sort of represents the Atman, or like your capital S self, your like spiritual self. And then the moon represents the reflected aspects of that in you as an individual person and personality. So it really more reflects your mind, your consciousness, your mood, your emotions, but really your ability to feel. And so the moon correlates a lot with your emotions, your sense of peace, but also can relate to what nourishes you, what fills you up, and what you're sensitive to. So I like to think of the sun as like, this is sort of who I am inside, in my, like on a soul level. But what I'm actually reflecting to people is more my moon, shows a little bit of my personality and how I'm feeling and expressing and my moods. But the ascendant, I think, is the strongest piece of our identity. It's why Vedic astrology emphasizes it more. The Western astrology, which says more the personality is the sun, which is what you shine out to people. The ascendant is sort of really fundamental in that it's who you're here to be in this lifetime. And it can be different than your moon sign and your sun sign. For me, it is. Like at a soul level, my sun's in Aquarius, so I'm a servant. I just instinctively, my soul wants to serve. But in this lifetime, I'm here to be a Gemini, which is serving with ideas. And I'm here to live a life. I'm here to be a Gemini in personality and like as who I am and in this life. But I'm also here to live the life path of a Gemini. And so the ascendant, because it's tied to Earth, it's actually Earth in the chart. It shows you where the Earth was facing when you were born, that section of the sky. And so it's tied to what happens on Earth, whereas the sun is more what happens at the soul level and the moon is what happens more with the mind. And so the earth, because it's earth, it's like, this is who I'm here, what to do on here, who to be on earth, but I still have the soul side that kind of operates in this way as the sun. And so and every ascendant, when you live your life as an ascendant, it's kind of like a different kind of life. Every ascendant has its strengths and beautiful qualities, and every ascendant has one thing it struggles with in their life. That thing that they struggle with helps them grow. And part of your life path isn't just pursuing your Rahu, your purpose. It's also about growing in that way and struggling with that in your life. So, so for you guys, for who are Taurus ascendants, would you like me to talk about your Taurus ascendants, or is that too personal to share?
I'm a Scorpio, I think.
Oh, you're Scorpio
In Western?
ascendant?
In Western or
But-
Vedic?
Well,
Oh,
in your
in
Vedic
Vedic.
In
chart-
Vedic, you'll be your Taurus because I'm a Taurus.
No, in Vedic, I'm a Scorpio. In Western, I'm a Sagittarius.
Okay.
Really?
Your ascendant, your rising sign.
Mm-hmm. I
Yes.
just did.
Okay, cool.
I took a screenshot.
How is that
Awesome.
possible if your
Yay.
birthday's 2 days before mine?
Well,
Ascendant.
it's based on the time you
That's
were
not-
born,
Oh,
which
dear.
changes.
Okay. Sorry.
Your sons are the same.
I was gonna say, I was like, how is that possible? I'm thinking
Yeah,
of the
Scorpio.
sun.
So we'll talk about Scorpio then, which is a really interesting life path to lead. And I think Scorpios get a bad rap in astrology, right? Have you guys noticed this? The Scorpios
Yeah.
always get a
Mhm.
bad rap.
I think so.
And it's totally not the case. Actually, we love Scorpios, very much so. Because they're the best friends in the chart. They're the devoted friends. They're the people who won't leave your side when you're going through a hard time. And there's very few people who would do that. Person who's a Scorpio ascendant, the one thing, and so they have these beautiful qualities where they feel very deeply, they're very passionate, and they're very about self-improvement internally and processing their emotions. And they happen to also be very charismatic usually. People are attracted to Scorpios, and they're also really good in business. So those areas of life they're fine with. The one thing they struggle with though is people. Because the goal of a Scorpio is to fix their emotions, is to sort of try to get a handle on all these amazing, like to really go deep inside and like take a look at, the darker parts of yourself and heal them and process them and like not be afraid to confront them. They're heroic in that way. And they're often the psychologists of the chart. People who have planets in Scorpio often have a really understanding of psychology and how people work. And they really like explore that deeply. And so then they can use that to help people. But when dealing with romantic relationships or relationships where both people have to get their needs met, where you're vulnerable to another person, that's when a Scorpio person has trouble because there's always stirring up their emotions and trying to face the deep pain in their heroicism. It makes them often feel a little bit more on the insecure side and vulnerable. And Vedic is one of the cool things about Vedic astrology and astrology in general is it tells you about how things work. It tells you how the world works, and the way relationships work is a lot different than we think. And relationships are the same. The house related to relationships is the same house as business partnerships. So it's about negotiating agreements, like a business partnership. Like you would meet at a business table and be like, I want this, you want this. Let's talk about it and figure out a compromise impartially. But when a Scorpio person, when they're feeling insecure and afraid and vulnerable because they can't, the other thing too is with relationships is one of the things, and it's built in the chart, is the eighth house teaches us that you can't control other people. You can't. It's not possible. And how we make peace with that is the eighth house. But a Scorpio person likes to try.
Yeah.
And because it comes from a place of deep pain, it's because they're so brave in facing their deep stuff. They're more aware of their fears and insecurities, and they're more aware of how vulnerable they are to other people and how other people can hurt them. And so one of the things they do and they struggle with in relationships is that they'll try to get other people, they'll use their psychological knowledge to sort of try to get other people to get their way so that they feel emotionally better. And not, and really all they had to do was be like, I'm scared. Can you reassure me? And usually the other person would reassure them. And instead, a Scorpio person kind of like thinks they have to make the other person do those things by, you know, by like making them feel guilty or being really upset or playing or like kissing up to the person or something. And it's why it's cool, because in Scorpio's charts, the first house rules the sixth house, is the house of enemies. So Scorpios end up being their own worst enemy, because when they really need reassurance and love, they can push people away sometimes with all those tactics. It can be hard to get along with people or to feel comfortable with people as a Scorpio. And so that's the one thing they struggle with. It's so funny, whenever I do a reading for Scorpios, they're like, yes, I totally know what you mean. I'm totally like that. And it's not a sinister thing. It actually comes from a place of just feeling vulnerable. And so I'm married to someone who has a few planets in Scorpio. And so when he wants something, he doesn't just tell me directly. He'll make a snide comment, or he'll like criticize me, or he'll act upset and cold and he won't talk to me for an hour or something. And then I know that that's not because he's being mean to me. It's because he's feeling vulnerable and he needs reassurance about something. And it's helped me not take that personally, because the reason why it's hard for the other person, because the person who's with the Scorpio person gets hurt, and because they love the Scorpio person, they'll stay with them for a while, but then eventually it hurts too much. And and that's why sometimes it can be a struggle with relationships. Whereas if a Scorpio person has actually usually incredible friendships, because with friendships, you feel safe with the person. You don't feel like they're going to hurt you. And so, or could potentially hurt you. And so that's where they thrive. And that's why they have such successful, rich friendships. It's not that they're good. It's not that they're bad at relationships. It's just within romantic relationships where you're vulnerable, some of your defense mechanisms come out. And that's just the one thing that you'll learn how to grow in this lifetime. It's really interesting to look at Pisces ascendants and Aries ascendants, because Pisces are the last sign. And so they are finishing lessons. And so the things they struggle with are usually very hard. And the Aries ascendants are the first sign. So they're usually starting a new cycle of growth. So when you're born as an Aries ascendant, you're here to like go out in the world and make mistakes. So it's like each ascendant has a sacred life path that they're here to focus on. And so in addition to all the things that the planets say you should work on in your birth chart, this life path is here to do this thing. Wow. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really eye-opening. I'm currently single, so I'm not in a relationship, but I have like really amazing friends, like my best friends I've been friends with since like middle school and before that. So yeah, that's really interesting. I definitely am not good at like, when it comes to like guys, I'm not good at like opening up and like showing them my vulnerable side. I don't like that at all. So yeah, I relate to that.
And that's the thing. That's one of the things that can hold you back then, because you only feel close to somebody and they only prove that they can be a good partner to you when you are in a vulnerable place and you share that with them and they rise to the occasion. Because there's always the risk that you're vulnerable with them and they hurt you. But as a Scorpio person, you also know how to heal yourself and face those things psychologically. You're braver than you think. So but it is going to be harder, and to honor that and to not beat yourself up. That's the other cool thing about astrology, is it's a lot about self-acceptance and even self-love. Like, I'm supposed to be this way. I'm supposed to struggle with this thing or have it be a little bit more challenging. And it's okay that I don't have it figured out, because I'm growing by having these experiences. So it's kind of cool. So that's exactly, it's like a side effect of how awesome you are,
like whatever I'm going through, the planets literally meant for this to happen. They were aligned and they meant for it.
Well, it's ultimately what I think astrology is about. My teacher, Sam, always says that life is not a playground, it's a school. And we're here to grow by having experiences. The more experiences we have, we develop sides of ourselves and our ability to handle what each planet represents. And then we carry it with us in the next lifetime. And that's why extraordinary people are extraordinary. And we're on our way to becoming extraordinary. And this is just the next lesson that where we need to grow. And so it helps to know to what lessons and growth paths to focus on, and others that you can set aside and not worry about so much. So
yeah, I love that it helps you like recognize things about yourself that you might not even notice until someone like says it to you and you're like, oh yeah, I actually do that.
Totally. And it also tells you like what helps, what you can do about it, which I find is because I find it's just so helpful. Like what will help me? What can help this? You know, what can I do to make this better? How can I handle
know
it?
you also recommended to me when you did my birth chart reading a few years ago, like even if you have a significant other, like just knowing their birth chart can help you understand like how they might react to something or like why you might fight about certain things. So like it really can be beneficial for anyone in your life as well as yourself.
Oh, totally. I've had a relationship reading and it made a huge difference in my marriage. One of the things that I was talking about my husband and I have a wonderful relationship. But my husband can be critical at times. And I used to take it personally, excessively personally, based on my birth chart, because my moon's in my 7th house. So my emotions are tied to how my partner feels. I used to take it personally. And then a teacher, Sam, was like, no, he just complains to complains, but he still loves you. And you can see it in the chart. It's just like, that's just how he is. And so now when he complains, I don't think of it as like a personal attack and that's what he really thinks about me and stuff. And so I just kind of like, oh, there he is complaining again. And I kind of brush it off, and it made me so much happier within that. So, so it's great. And then I can accept him for who he is too. And relationship compatibility is another fascinating topic. It's so helpful to get closure on past relationships, but also to know how to make the most of current ones and why you are the way you are. And Vedic astrology has some really cool techniques with that are very, very special. So
yeah, that's probably so cool to get into and learn about.
Yeah.
If I had a boyfriend, I would totally do that, but I don't.
I love the idea of, instead of like couples therapy, it's like we're going to get a couple's birth chart and it's basically the same thing. We're just going to understand each other better. I love that.
Yeah, it helps a lot. And it's never an issue of like, you're not compatible or not. It's like, this is how you guys are. Here's how you can make the most of it. Can you handle that? So it's neat. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you this question now, just because now we're talking about, and this is just something that I fight with my boyfriend about as far as astrology goes. So I really want to ask you this, and please tell me if this question makes sense. I'm going to try to word it in as simple as possible, but I always say to him that, just because we as humans haven't been able to scientifically study something, and I always use gravity as the example, like gravity, we see the physical effects of it, we've given it a name, it's in science textbooks, but just because something that we haven't been able to study scientifically, like maybe how the planets affect us emotionally, that doesn't make it not real. And so I guess my question is, do you think it's just our human experience that makes studying something like this hard? Therefore, fewer humans are like susceptible to buy into it because it's not like there's no concrete results that they can physically see. You know what I mean? Is that the reason for why there's so many skeptics, do you think? Like, this is coming from my boyfriend who has like a scientific brain, and he's like, I need it to have like a scientific definition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, my husband's the same way. He's outlawed Vedic astrology talk and kind of questions my judgment that I believe in it. But I also think that that's naive, because I think it's naive I'm always the kind of person who will try anything once and I will experiment with it. And if I try it and it works for me, I'll take it on. If not, then I'll set it aside. I think that's the best way to figure out if something works.
If something is
versus,
real.
yeah. And it's hard to it's hard to scientifically prove something that's so complicated and is done in so many different ways. There's actually an ancient Hindu myth around this, is that astrologers in ancient times, astrologers were getting too good at predicting things, that one of the gods, I think it was Shiva, cursed them to never agree with each other.
Interesting.
And so that led to lots of different schools of astrology, so that there could be like this, you could figure out the future, but there's this also this mystique, you know, too. And I think it's a way of protecting how accurate those things can be. But I think I have a hard, if you've never studied something earnestly and tried to understand it in depth, you are going to misunderstand it. And you are going to be skeptical, and in order to really feel how powerful astrology can be, you do have to study it in depth. And because there's so many different ways of doing things, like a lot of people are judging astrology based on reading a horoscope, which is one astrologer's opinion on what that moon cycle is for that sun sign. You're so much more than your sun sign, and you're so much more than your chart. And so a lot of people just read that and be like, that makes no sense to me, and dismiss it altogether. And I did that for a while, until I found something that really worked, and studied it in more depth. So I think I have sympathy for the skeptics, and it also is based on their chart. Some people need to understand, value different things differently, and some people are actually built to be more open and into more alternative things that are more taboo, or not widely as accepted. And so that's also based on your chart. And I feel like my husband has to be a skeptic. Let him be a skeptic. Let him keep his thing. I'm not going to let that affect how I feel about things, as long as he doesn't stop me from doing it and stuff, which he doesn't. So
I love the idea of saying to a skeptic, like, of course you're a skeptic, it's in your chart, and like watching them get so mad. I think that's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But I mean, it's just people, there's different points of view. So we can't, you usually can't convince someone. And another thing that I thought was really interesting, another perspective, is my meditation teacher talked about this once, is he said that skeptics are disappointed mystics. That people who are born skeptic end up starting out feeling idealistic and are very aware that something more is out there, some bigger thing. And then they live life and they're disappointed by what happens on Earth and how it doesn't live up to that ideal.
Wow.
Oh, that's
interesting. And so
that's so interesting.
Yeah. And so it's like they're tapped in and disappointed. And so they need to find something that doesn't disappoint them.
So they have to like close off to it in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they're almost the most sensitive, I think. So we just have to be more patient with them and give them love and as much scientific evidence as we can. But there are astrologers who are trying to do research, and more scientific research and historical research. But I think it's the nature of the nature of the science is that of astrology is it's so complicated that it would be really hard to prove any one thing definitively. And I think because it's so individualized, it would be really hard to prove anything scientifically. And even if it isn't right, it gives you wisdom to help you live your life. And I think like that's worth a shot. And if I can tell you something based on some symbols in the chart that help you with your life, like that's what matters more, I think, even if it isn't proven by science. So
yeah, and I think sometimes it's so scary accurate, like it's wild.
Yeah, I think I really only appreciated it when I started doing readings for people that I've never met,
and then watch them react like,
yeah,
oh, that's so accurate.
Yeah, and a lot of times sometimes when astrology gets it wrong, or an astrologer gets it wrong, or a forecast gets it wrong, it's not because the astrology was wrong, the science is wrong. It was because the way the person who interpreted it wasn't seeing things. So yeah.
Are you familiar with the app The Pattern?
I've heard about it. I've had people recommend it to me. Isn't it like it gives you forecasts and stuff based
You can
Yeah.
like
on
make
the
bonds
chart?
with other people, and it tells you how compatible you are with other people. It's really interesting.
That's
Yeah, I like
awesome.
it. It shows you like world stuff that's happening, and then also like stuff that's related to you. And I don't know, sometimes I read it and I'm like, this is so accurate. It's like crazy. And it just
Yeah,
like kind of opens up your eyes to things. And you're like, yeah, I relate to that. Yeah, that's what I do. And sometimes you just need to do that. Like you need to read something and like to remember that you do that. And then it helps you like change if it's something that's negative or something you need to work on.
totally, totally. And I say stick with the things that work for you, that really help you in your life. Because that means that that's a good astrologer and a good way of doing things. Because it's really like it's hard to get those things right. So if it's reliable on a daily basis, like that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So yay. Yeah.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time and Zoom's about to kick us out again. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering that last question. Thank you so much for sharing all your insight. This was so eye-opening and
Yeah.
fascinating. Please tell everyone where they can find you, how they can contact you for a birth chart reading, where they can find you on social media, maybe about the courses that you're developing, things like that.
Yeah, I'd love to. I you can find most of all of what I do on my website, jillblumenstock.com. It's Blumenstock with a U. And I do many things. For Vedic astrology readings, there's instructions for how to schedule a reading on my schedule and all the different kinds of readings I do. I do birth chart read. I recommend people to do a birth chart reading to understand their chart, and then next 6 months reading a few weeks later, because there's always something going on in the sky, and it tells you what you're focusing on this year, and also the astrological challenges, what to focus on month to month, but any astrological events to be prepared for, like eclipses and retrograde cycles and stuff, and how to handle them. And so that's the best way to learn about astrology, honestly, is tracking the planets, because it comes with a calendar to track the planets, and getting your readings, because you learn more each time you get a reading, because astrologer can fast track it for you. And the way I do readings is I teach you about how it works in addition to doing the reading. I also do relationship compatibility readings and productivity readings, how to plan your week, your month, and your decade, actually, based on your birth chart, which is fascinating. I also have a few tools I'm developing or have developed. There's a moon tracker that helps you track your mood, which can be great for planning your yoga classes, understanding how you and the people and other people feel in your life and how to support them, and when are the most productive periods in your week and month, and when you're going to face challenges, and also how to market to people. Honestly, there's a lot of really business applications to it as well. And then there's also a daily rhythms tracker. So if you want to learn about your daily routine changes by half an hour every week, so how to plan your day, your schedule based on the astrological rhythms, is another tool I'm developing. You can also email me at jillblumenstock@gmail.com. And I'm also on Facebook, and I have a newsletter and a Facebook where I sometimes post Vedic astrology updates when anything's in the sky sort of affecting everybody, just to give support. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. And in January, I'll be teaching a course on how to track the planets yourself, which will be really cool. That's happening in January. And you can probably find that on my schedule on my website. And yeah, so, and just going to keep continuing to make it easier to learn astrology for you guys in the future. So if there's anything I can do to help, it's good to get a reading when you're going through a hard time. It just helps you make sense of things. It's just nice to talk to somebody who can give you advice that really helps. So that's what I'm here for. So yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah,
And we'll link
you.
everything in the show notes so people can find you.
Yeah, you did such a
Thank
great
you.
job like explaining
Yes.
everything. I think it really made it clear for anyone that's going to listen to this doesn't know about astrology.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot to me. So yay.
All right. Thank you so much, Jill. And we will
Thank
talk
you.
soon.